Black CEO's mother mocked by billionaire family minutes later, he cancels the $700M deal. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. Hey Blackie, go serve us some champagne. The words cracked through the ballroom like a whip wrapped in laughter. Crystal glasses froze midair. A violinist missed a note. The room, all gold and chandeliers, suddenly felt smaller. At the center stood Evelyn Carter, her gloved hand resting on a phone, her eyes steady as the insult landed. The young woman who shouted was dressed in velvet black, pearls around her neck, the kind of smile that thinks it owns the world. Behind her, three men in tuxedos erupted in laughter, the kind that smells like money and ignorance. Evelyn didn't move, didn't flinch. The light from the chandelier caught the edge of her hat, casting a soft shadow across her face, calm but sharp. The silence that followed wasn't quiet. It was charged. Across the room, whispers stirred. She must be staff, someone said. No, she's not wearing a uniform, another whispered back. But the damage was done. The humiliation had already taken its seat at the table. One of the men, tall, smug, added with a chuckle, "Guess we're short on servers tonight." Their laughter folded over itself again, too loud, too rehearsed. Evelyn lifted her phone slowly, pressing it to her ear. No one noticed the tiny gold initials engraved on its case: C.G.H. Carter, Global Holdings. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to Evelyn. She glanced at the glass table beside her, seeing her own reflection, not hurt, just tired. The kind of tired that comes from recognizing an old wound disguised as a new joke. The maitre d' appeared, nervously tugging his cuffs. "Madam, please, let me handle this." Evelyn gave him a small smile. "No need." Her tone was soft, but it carried through the entire ballroom like a line drawn in glass. The young woman tilted her head, amused. "Oh, come on, it was just a joke. You people are so sensitive." That phrase, "you people," dropped heavier than the first insult. Evelyn's fingers tightened around her phone. The air thickened. By the grand piano, a server, young, black, maybe 23, paused mid-step, eyes wide, tray trembling slightly. He didn't record. Not yet, but the look on his face said everything the room refused to. Evelyn turned slightly toward the laughter. Her voice was even, measured, almost gentle. "You sure you want to finish that sentence?" The laughter faltered. Just for a moment. Enough for guilt to peek through the gold. Outside the ballroom, thunder rolled over Manhattan, a low rumble that shook the windows. Inside, a storm of a different kind was gathering. Evelyn Carter, mother of the man about to sign a $700 million deal with the Kingsley family, had just been mistaken for the help, and she wasn't done standing yet. No one in that ballroom knew who she was. To them, Evelyn Carter was just another well-dressed black woman who'd wandered too close to power. But upstairs, 10 stories above this chandeliered cage, her last name shimmered across the city skyline in gold: Carter Global Holdings. At the table near the window, a man in his 40s lifted a glass of champagne. "Unbelievable," he muttered, watching her from afar. "Some people just don't know their place." His name was Richard Kingsley, chairman of Kingsley Investments. The man set to finalize a $700 million merger with her son the next morning. He didn't recognize her. He'd met Malcolm Carter 3 times in glass offices and private jets. Never the mother who built him. The woman he was mocking was the same one who once scrubbed marble floors in Atlanta so her son could afford his first laptop. Now, the same marble shone beneath her heels. Evelyn stood by the edge of the ballroom, pretending to study the paintings while the laughter behind her died into awkward murmurs. Her phone buzzed once. A single message flashed. "Malcolm, dinner went well. Signing tomorrow. You okay, Ma?" She typed back 3 words. "We'll talk soon." Then she slipped the phone into her clutch and exhaled slowly, that kind of breath that tastes like patience and steel. The maitre d' reappeared, face pale, whispering, "Mrs. Carter, I'm so sorry. They didn't know." Evelyn stopped him with a small shake of her head. They knew. They just didn't care. The line hit him harder than a shout. At the far side of the room, the young server Marcus approached quietly. He set a fresh glass of water beside her and said under his breath, "Ma'am, I saw everything. If you want me to report," she smiled faintly. "No. Keep your dignity. That's report enough." Her voice steadied him. His hands stopped trembling. He stepped back, nodding once, as if he'd just witnessed something holy. Near the grand piano, Richard's wife whispered, "Maybe we went too far." "So say says one sign to Peter ply ber quarter. It's a sky ber ply ber cons in the Peter ply brain." But Richard chuckled. "Please, she'll forget it by dessert." Across the table, their son smirked. "If she's even invited to dessert." They all laughed again. Quieter now, but poisoned all the same. Evelyn turned toward the window. Outside, rain began tapping against the glass, small, deliberate knocks, like the city itself was listening. Every drop mirrored another memory. The loan officer who told her she was too ambitious for a single mother, the realtor who said her son would never get past Harlem, and now, this room, another chorus of the same old song. She didn't cry. She straightened her shoulders, lifted her chin, and whispered to herself, "They built their empires on arrogance. Mine was built on memory." A waiter brushed past, nearly spilling a tray. She caught it midair without even turning her head. The motion was so precise, so graceful it looked rehearsed. But it wasn't. It was survival. Back at the Kingsley table, a young intern leaned over to Richard and asked, "Did you know who she is?" Richard scoffed. "Who cares? She's nobody important." The camera flash from another guest cut across the room, catching Evelyn's face in perfect light, calm, dignified, unforgettable. She knew then the story wasn't over. Tonight wasn't humiliation, it was exposure. And by tomorrow morning, the name Carter would mean something the Kingsleys could never buy: grace with power. The laughter didn't stay contained to one table. Like perfume gone sour, it drifted through the ballroom, polite chuckles, disguised sneers, curious stares. That's how ridicule travels in rooms like this, softly, but with precision. A woman near the string quartet whispered, "Isn't that the lady they mistook for staff?" Her companion smirked. "She should take it as a compliment. The servers here are well trained." And just like that, the humiliation turned into gossip, the social currency of the elite. Evelyn Carter could feel it spreading, not through words, but through tone. The quick glances, the practiced smiles, the way people moved slightly aside when she passed. She had lived long enough to recognize polite cruelty. It doesn't yell. It whispers in designer accents. At the far end of the hall, a photographer raised his lens. Evelyn instinctively turned away, but the flash went off anyway. In that instant, her face, calm and sharp, was captured between laughter and lightning. That image would matter later. But for now, it was just one more spark in a room full of friction. Richard Kingsley stood near the buffet, still smirking. "Did you see her face?" he said to his son. "She looked like she wanted to cry." His son, Daniel, replied, "She looked like she wanted to own the place." They both laughed, missing the irony completely. A few guests shifted uneasily. Not everyone found it funny. One of them, Margaret Lang, a charity director in a silver gown, leaned toward a colleague. "This feels wrong," she whispered. "That woman hasn't said a word, and yet somehow they look smaller than her." Her colleague nodded but said nothing. Silence, after all, was still the safest currency in this world. Evelyn moved slowly toward the garden doors, needing air. Marcus, the young server, caught sight of her leaving and instinctively followed a few paces behind, pretending to refill glasses. He had stopped recording, but not observing. Each gesture she made, deliberate, grounded, graceful, was a quiet defiance against the insult that birthed the evening. Near the dessert bar, the Kingsleys kept talking. "I told you," Richard said. "These charity galas are crawling with people who don't belong." His wife tesked softly. "Well, they let anyone in these days. Money doesn't mean class." Evelyn turned her head slightly at that, not enough to be noticed, but enough to catch every word. Her calm was dangerous now, the kind that made people uncomfortable because it didn't break. The pianist switched to a slower tune, something classical but cold. The kind of music that made people feel important. Marcus whispered to another staff member, "You know who she is?" The man shrugged. "No clue. But whoever she is, she's not afraid." At the bar, Richard gestured toward Evelyn again. his voice dripping with entitlement. Someone should tell her to leave before she ruins the photos. Margaret Lang stepped forward this time. Maybe she belongs in them more than you do. The words weren't shouted, just spoken clear enough to cut the air. Richard blinked. His smile faltered. For the first time that night, the current of control shifted. A few heads turned. A few others looked away. Evelyn didn't react. She just stood by the doorway, her hand on the curtain, eyes steady on the city lights. The rain outside had turned to a soft drizzle, beads of water sliding down the glass like time itself slowing. Behind her, voices argued quietly, the laughter cracking under the weight of conscience. Marcus caught her reflection in the window. She wasn't angry. She wasn't humiliated. She was calculating. And that calm, that stillness, that was the sound of a reckoning beginning to breathe. Evelyn Carter didn't storm out. She didn't flinch or cry. She simply stood there, facing the rain-flecked glass doors, her reflection divided by water and light. The orchestra played something soft, unaware that the real symphony in the room was tension, a quiet one, written in shame and denial. Behind her, the whispers simmered down, replaced by the sound of nervous cutlery. It's what rich people do when guilt enters the room. They stir their wine like it's someone else's fault. Richard Kingsley cleared his throat. "She's still here?" he murmured. His voice was low but traveled easily through the hush. His wife leaned in, whispering, "Maybe just let it go." Richard smirked. "Let it go? You can't teach people manners if you keep excusing them." He smiled at his reflection in the champagne flute, proud of his wit. That was his first mistake, believing civility could hide arrogance. Evelyn turned slightly, her posture calm, her eyes unreadable. To anyone watching, she was simply admiring the rain. But in truth, she was counting seconds, letting every beat of silence grow teeth. That silence, that refusal to entertain, was her language of power. At the corner of the ballroom, Marcus stood frozen, clutching his tray. The gold rim of a glass trembled against the silver. He couldn't look away. Something about the stillness around Evelyn scared him more than the laughter had. It wasn't defeat. It was focus, the kind that precedes storms. A hostess approached timidly. "Ma'am, are you sure you're all right? I could have security escort." Evelyn cut her off gently. "Never call security on peace. It's louder than anything they can handle." Her words landed softly, but carried like thunder. The hostess blinked, unsure how to respond, and retreated as if stepping away from heat. In the background, the Kingsleys' laughter faded into shallow chatter. Richard had begun to notice something unsettling. People weren't laughing with him anymore. They were watching her. One by one, the guests' gazes shifted across the room, toward the woman by the window who refused to shrink. Margaret Lang whispered to a friend, "That's not composure. That's control." And she was right. Evelyn's phone buzzed again, faintly. She didn't reach for it. She knew who it was, Malcolm. Her son never slept early before a major signing. She could almost hear his voice, calm, measured, relentless. He'd inherited that from her, the art of patience as power. She took a single sip of water, placed the glass down, and adjusted her gloves. Every movement was deliberate, rehearsed through a lifetime of being tested. She remembered a boardroom, 20 years ago, when a man called her the secretary. She had smiled then, to the same restrained curve of her lips she wore now. That smile had built empires. Across the room, a young reporter from the Chronicle aimed his camera discreetly. He wasn't supposed to be there. He was covering the gala's charity angle. But what he saw, a black woman standing tall amid discomfort, felt like history in motion. The flash went off again, this time intentional. The moment was recorded. Evelyn turned. Finally. Her eyes swept the room, unhurried, steady, a slow scan that made every person she looked at straighten up slightly, like children caught misbehaving. Her gaze stopped at Richard Kingsley. He froze halfway through his drink. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. The air between them said everything and promised more. From the balcony above, thunder rumbled once more, echoing through the ballroom's vaulted ceiling. The pianist's hands faltered for half a beat, then found their place again. Marcus whispered to himself, barely audible, "She's not waiting for an apology. She's waiting for the right moment." And that's exactly what Evelyn Carter was doing. Waiting not because she lacked power, but because she knew that when she finally moved, it would be the last sound this room would ever forget. The silence should have healed the room. Instead, it made people restless, like guilt had taken a seat and no one knew where to look. Forks tapped against plates without rhythm. The string quartet hesitated, their bows trembling midair. Near the back, Marcus stood beside a table of untouched desserts. The silver tray in his hands had started to sweat under the weight of his hesitation. He was young, 2 months into this job, already aware that one wrong word could cost him everything. But something about what he'd just seen, what he'd felt pressed against his conscience harder than fear. He set the tray down, quietly, firmly. Then he exhaled, straightened his bow tie, and walked toward Evelyn. From across the room, a few guests turned to watch. The Kingsleys noticed first. Richard leaned to his wife, muttering, "What's he doing? That's staff." But Marcus didn't stop. He stopped exactly 3 feet from Evelyn, lowered his head slightly, and spoke loud enough for the nearest tables to hear. "Ma'am, I just wanted to say you didn't deserve that. Not tonight, not anywhere." It wasn't loud, but it cut through the music like truth always does. A few guests froze. Someone near the stage coughed. Even the pianist paused for a beat. Evelyn's eyes softened. "What's your name, son?" "Marcus, ma'am." She nodded. "Thank you, Marcus. You've already done more than most people in this room." Richard Kingsley's voice cracked in irritation. "Excuse me? Is this part of the program?" His tone was sharp, forced, a man trying to claw back control. Margaret Lang, still seated nearby, replied without looking at him, "Maybe it should be." Marcus turned to face the Kingsley table. His voice was trembling but clear. "You spoke to her like she was invisible. Everyone saw it. You laughed. You called her names. And she still showed more grace than all of you combined." Gasps fluttered across the room like startled birds. A waiter near the bar nearly dropped a bottle. The air was thick, too heavy for comfort, too honest for denial. Evelyn placed a calm hand on Marcus's arm. "That's enough, sweetheart. Don't let their noise change your dignity." He hesitated, then nodded and stepped back, his hands shaking not from fear this time, but from release. Richard tried to laugh it off, but it came out brittle. "Well, this is new. Lectures from the help. What's next? Moral speeches from the valet?" A few uneasy chuckles tried to follow but died midair. Nobody wanted to be the next headline in a story that suddenly felt like one. The young reporter, still watching from the side, lifted his camera again. This time the frame caught both faces, the arrogant power that mocked and the quiet strength that endured. Evelyn turned toward Richard's table, her voice smooth and surgical. "You think money measures class. It doesn't. It only amplifies what's missing." The sentence landed like glass shattering in velvet. Even the chandeliers seemed to hum after it. Richard clenched his jaw. "Who even are you?" Evelyn didn't answer. She simply smiled, the kind that carries history. Then she turned to Marcus. "You may want to keep that courage, young man. It'll serve you better than their approval ever could." The boy swallowed hard. "Yes, ma'am." Margaret Lang clapped once. Soft, deliberate. Then another person joined. Then another. It wasn't applause for drama, it was acknowledgement. A few phones lifted quietly, capturing the moment that would later flood timelines across the country under one caption: "Grace under fire." Evelyn didn't flinch at the cameras. She simply turned her gaze toward the rain again, her reflection split between light and storm. Behind her, Marcus whispered to a colleague. She changed the whole room without even raising her voice. He was right. Because in that instant, Evelyn Carter had done what power rarely does. She made silence louder than shame. Applause was never supposed to happen at a Kingsley gala. It broke every unwritten rule that wealth equals control, and control means silence. Yet there it was, echoing against marble and glass. Quiet, hesitant, but real. And for a moment, the room belonged to her. But not everyone could stand it. From the edge of the hall, Daniel Reeves, the event manager in a tailored gray suit, moved quickly across the floor. His face was tight, professional, rehearsed, the kind of man who believed efficiency could disguise arrogance. He stopped beside Evelyn and Marcus, his voice dropping into the tone people use when they think they're handling a situation. "Excuse me, ma'am. I'm afraid we can't have disruptions during the event. You're making the guests uncomfortable." The irony was almost poetic. The very man responsible for comfort was now amplifying discomfort. Evelyn turned slightly, meeting his eyes with calm precision. "And which guests are those, Mr. Reeves?" he answered, too fast. "Event manager for the Kingsley Foundation." "Well, Mr. Reeves," she said softly, "some of your guests made me uncomfortable first. Yet I'm still here. Calm, silent, standing." Her tone was polite, but every syllable felt like it carried weight. He hesitated, then doubled down, as men like him often do when they mistake authority for righteousness. I understand, but this isn't the place to discuss. Evelyn interrupted gently. Then where exactly is the place, Mr. Reeves? Because I've spent a lifetime being told to wait for it. The line cut through the air like a violin string snapping mid-song. Around them, the audience shifted not physically, but morally. People began choosing sides with their eyes. Richard Kingsley saw his chance to regain footing. He raised his glass. Daniel, it's fine. She's clearly emotional. Let's just escort her out quietly before things. Evelyn's eyes flicked to him, sharp and cold. Before things what, Mr. Kingsley? Become visible? Gasps rippled through the room again. Daniel stepped forward, his patience cracking. Ma'am, I'll have to insist. If you don't comply, I'll need to call security. Marcus, still nearby, couldn't stay silent. Sir, with all due respect, she didn't do anything wrong. Daniel snapped back. I wasn't asking for your opinion, staff. His words echoed louder than he meant them to, and that was his mistake. The young reporter's camera caught every syllable. Even the pianist stopped pretending to play. In one breath, the man had turned a private embarrassment into a public scandal. Evelyn didn't move. Her voice lowered. Soft, deliberate, dangerous. You just dismissed the only person in this room who acted with decency. Do you speak to all your employees that way, or just the ones who look like him? Daniel's throat tightened. He stuttered. Ma'am, please. This isn't about race. Of course it isn't, she said calmly. Until it always is. She turned slightly toward Marcus, who stood frozen between fear and awe. It's all right, dear. Some people confuse order with justice. They enforce one and ignore the other. Richard scoffed. Now she's quoting philosophy. Margaret Lang finally stood. No, Richard, she said clearly. She's quoting experience. That line broke the last barrier. A murmur swept across the guests, half shame, half awakening. Phones came out. Lenses turned. The once controlled gala was no longer a private playground. It was a stage. Daniel realized too late that he'd lost control of the narrative. He looked at Richard for help, but the billionaire's face was red, his confidence unraveling. Evelyn leaned closer, her voice barely above a whisper. You should put that phone call to security on hold, Mr. Reeves. You'll need a different number soon. He blinked, confused. What do you mean? But she didn't answer. She only gave him the same measured smile she'd given men far more powerful right before they learned who she really was. The ballroom's temperature seemed to drop a few degrees. Outside, lightning flashed again, not bright, just steady, as if the city itself was holding its breath. Marcus whispered, She's not fighting back. She's setting something up. And for the first time, everyone in that room, from staff to billionaire, felt it. Something irreversible had just begun. The storm outside cracked open just as the one inside did. Thunder rolled over Manhattan, low and deliberate, as if echoing Evelyn Carter's silence. Daniel Reeves, red-faced and desperate to prove he still held authority, waved for one of the uniformed attendants by the door. Security, he called, his voice trembling under the pretense of confidence. Please escort this guest outside. The Kingsleys don't tolerate disruption. The room froze. Even the orchestra stopped mid-note. The sound that followed wasn't music, it was shock breathing. Evelyn didn't move. She stood perfectly still, framed by the chandelier above and the reflection of lightning in the window behind her. Marcus whispered, No, he didn't just do that. But he had. Richard Kingsley, already flushed with wine and arrogance, leaned back in his chair and smirked. About time, he muttered. This is a charity event, not open mic night. His wife gave a nervous laugh, but even she could feel it. Something in the air had shifted. Something dangerous and uncontainable. The guard approached carefully. He looked young, maybe early 30s, unsure. He'd heard enough of what had happened to hesitate. Ma'am, he began quietly. I'm sorry, but… No, Evelyn said. Her tone didn't rise. It dropped. It sank through the air like gravity, pulling every gaze back to her. Don't apologize for following orders, just remember who gave them. The guard froze. He couldn't bring himself to touch her. Daniel stepped in, grabbing a napkin from the nearest table, his voice sharp. Ma'am, please, you've already disrupted this event enough. And then, it happened, a gesture so small it could have been an accident. The Kingsley's daughter, pale and irritated, stood and reached for a glass of red wine. She turned toward Evelyn with a smile that didn't belong at all. Maybe a little refreshment will calm her down. The glass tilted. Wine spilled crimson streaks across ivory silk. It splashed against Evelyn's dress, blooming like a wound. The room gasped. For a heartbeat, even the thunder outside went silent. Daniel's jaw slackened. Richard exhaled a nervous laugh. "Oops," his daughter whispered, smiling faintly. "Guess we're all human, right?" Marcus dropped his tray. "Are you out of your mind?" he blurted. A ripple of voices followed. Someone muttered, "This is insane," another said. "She didn't deserve that." The whisper had become a wave. Evelyn looked down at the stain deep red against pearl white. She brushed her hand gently over the fabric. Steady, careful, deliberate. Then she looked up, straight into the girl's eyes. "My dear, accidents reveal character. You just introduced yours." The girl stepped back, her smile gone. Richard rose from his chair, stammering, "This is getting ridiculous." "No," Evelyn said quietly. "It's getting recorded." Every phone in the room was raised now. The reporter's camera light blinked red. In seconds, the moment had become immortal. Daniel Reeves rubbed his temple. "Everyone, calm down. Please, no videos." Margaret Lang cut him off. "Too late, Daniel. You made this public the second you called security on a woman who stayed polite." The tension snapped. The pretense of control shattered like glass underfoot. Evelyn took a step forward. The guard instinctively stepped aside. Her calm was no longer silence, it was command. "I came here tonight as a guest," she said softly. "But clearly this house forgot who built it." Her eyes moved across the room, from Marcus's trembling hands to Richard's pale face, to the red stain spreading like truth across her dress. "Cleanup won't fix this," she continued. "Not the floor, not the stain, not your names." The chandelier above flickered once as lightning flashed again outside. Someone whispered, "Who is she?" No one answered, not yet. Evelyn turned toward the door, phone in hand, her fingers calm, steady. "Call him," she said under her breath. Marcus heard it, though no one else did. "It's time." She didn't shout, she didn't demand. But the way she walked, unhurried, regal, unstoppable, made every person in that ballroom understand. Something had just ended, and something much greater was about to begin. The ballroom was still shaking from the echo of that last sentence when Evelyn Carter reached for her phone. Her fingers didn't tremble. Her heartbeat didn't rush. She had mastered the art of stillness long ago, when silence was her only weapon, and dignity her only armor. The screen lit up. Only one contact mattered. M. Carter. She pressed call. 3 rings. Then a low, familiar voice answered. "Mom, you all right?" Her lips curved slightly. "I'm fine, but your deal isn't." That was all she said. She didn't raise her voice, but the calm in her tone could slice through steel. Across the line, Malcolm knew. His chair slid back. Papers shuffled in the background. "What happened?" The city sever was issued. Evelyn looked across the ballroom at the Kingsleys' frozen faces, at Daniel Reeves still pretending control, at the red stain drying on her dress. They forgot who they were talking to. A pause. No panic. Just silence. Then his voice, steady as hers. "Do you want me to come there?" "No," she said. "I want you to end it. Tonight." And then she hung up. No goodbyes. No warnings. Just the quiet certainty of a woman who'd been underestimated one time too many. She slipped the phone back into her clutch, turned slowly, and faced the room again. Every gaze was on her. The pianist's hands rested motionless above the keys. Even the rain outside had softened, like the city was holding its breath. Daniel Reeves took a hesitant step forward. "Ma'am, please, if you'd just allow me to—" "You've already said enough," Evelyn replied, her tone silk over steel. "You're about to say a lot less." A murmur swept across the room. People shifted, not knowing why, but instinctively sensing the balance of power had just moved. Margaret Lang leaned toward the young reporter, whispering, "Record everything. This isn't gossip anymore, it's history." Evelyn walked toward the center of the ballroom. Each click of her heel sounded like punctuation, deliberate, final. She stopped beside the table where Richard Kingsley sat, pale and sweating now under his own chandelier. "You spent the night teaching me how to behave in your world," she said softly. "Now let me teach you what happens when that world depends on mine." Richard forced a laugh, the sound brittle. "Oh, please, this is absurd. You're just—" "The mother of the man you begged to save your company," she interrupted. The room gasped. Her voice was calm, but the truth inside it burned. Richard froze, trying to process. "What are you talking about?" "Carter Global Holdings," she said. "That name on the contracts you've been parading for months. That's my son. And in about 10 minutes, that deal you've been celebrating will cease to exist." Marcus's eyes widened. "She just ended $700 million like it was pocket change," he whispered. Evelyn turned to Daniel. "You should prepare an apology for your staff. You'll have time once this place clears out," he stammered. I don't understand." "You don't have to," she said. "Just remember how you spoke to me when you thought I couldn't matter." Her phone buzzed again, one short vibration. She glanced down. Message from Malcolm. "Contract voided. Statement pending release. You can leave whenever you're ready." In mentioned Setter Conter, she looked back at the Kingsleys, her calm finally breaking into something colder. Not anger, but justice made visible. "You wanted me gone," she said. "Consider your wish granted. I'm gone, so is your empire." The crowd shifted in stunned silence. No one clapped this time. No one dared move. The ballroom that once felt too bright now seemed too small, too heavy, too haunted by its own reflection. Evelyn took one last look around at the walls, the chandeliers, the faces that had laughed minutes ago. "Don't worry," she said softly. "You'll recover, just not your reputation." Then she turned toward the door, each step echoing through the marble like a countdown. Behind her, Marcus whispered. She didn't shout. She didn't even threaten. Margaret answered, voice trembling with awe. She didn't have to. Power doesn't need volume. It just needs truth. And with that, Evelyn Carter left the ballroom, leaving silence behind that felt louder than thunder. The doors burst open just as Evelyn reached the marble staircase. Every head turned. Through the storm's reflection in the glass, a tall man stepped in black suit, rain on his shoulders, purpose in his stride. Malcolm Carter. He didn't need introduction. He carried that quiet gravity only real power has, the kind that doesn't ask permission to exist. Two security guards instinctively moved aside as he passed. The air itself seemed to rearrange around him. Richard Kingsley half stood, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Malcolm, good God, you didn't have to come all the way here. Malcolm didn't answer. He looked only at his mother. For a heartbeat, the storm outside met the storm in his eyes. Evelyn gave him a small nod, permission, not greeting, and that was all he needed. He turned toward the room, his voice steady, deep, and devastatingly calm. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for interrupting your evening. I just came to collect something that no longer belongs here, my company's respect. The Leverment matter was in that self-fashioned down the Ropamans. A ripple of murmurs swept across the guests. Margaret Lang pressed her hand to her chest. The young reporter raised his camera. Malcolm continued, eyes fixed on the Kingsleys. As of 10 minutes ago, the $700 million merger between Carter Global Holdings and Kingsley Investments has been terminated. Effective immediately. The sentence landed like thunder, quiet but absolute. Richard tried to recover. Malcolm, be reasonable. This must be a misunderstanding. Malcolm's tone didn't waver. The misunderstanding, he said, was thinking my company would ever do business with people who humiliate my mother. Gasps broke through the hush. Someone whispered, his mother? As if the word itself rewrote the entire night. Every camera phone rose higher. Evelyn stood a few steps behind him now, silent, regal, the calm in the storm she'd summoned. Malcolm faced Daniel Reeves. Mr. Reeves, you can inform your staff this venue will no longer host any Carter events. Consider tonight your last. Daniel swallowed hard. Sir, I didn't know. You didn't ask, Malcolm said. That's the problem. He turned to Richard one last time. You built your wealth on reputation, Mr. Kingsley. You just buried it under your own arrogance. The room stayed frozen. No one dared breathe. Thunder cracked outside again, almost on cue. Malcolm looked at his mother. She smiled faintly, the kind of smile that ends wars. He offered his arm. Ready to go, Mom? Always, she said, and together they walked out past the chandeliers, past the silence, past every face that now realized what power looks like when it doesn't need to explain itself. When the doors closed behind them, all that remained was the sound of rain, steady, cleansing, final. The doors shut, and the silence that followed was unbearable. For the first time, the Kingsleys' ballroom, their pride, their fortress of prestige, felt like a courtroom. Richard Kingsley sank into his chair, pale, lips trembling around a half-formed defense that never came. His daughter stared at the red stain on the floor, the same color as the deal now gone. Daniel Reeves stood frozen beside the stage, phone buzzing with notifications he was too afraid to read. On every screen in that room, from waiters' pockets to reporters' lenses, the moment was already spreading. The clip was short, merciless, and perfect. You don't call security on peace. The deal's off. That's his mother. By the time someone whispered, "It's trending," the damage was done. The headlines were already writing themselves. Kingsley family humiliates black CEO's mother loses $700M deal in minutes. Oncer, Margaret Lang looked around the room at the guests pretending to check their phones, at the waiters whispering prayers under their breath. She whispered, "They'll remember this night for all the right reasons." Outside, the rain grew louder, washing over the glass like applause from a world finally watching. And inside, the empire that once laughed was learning how quiet ruin can be. By sunrise, the story had crossed oceans. News anchors spoke her name with reverence. Analysts called it the fastest corporate collapse in recent memory. The Kingsley logo flickered on trading screens, red arrows, plummeting. Inside their Manhattan office, phones rang without answer. Investors pulled out. Partners withdrew statements. What had begun as arrogance had evolved into isolation overnight. At the same time, a press release hit every major outlet stamped with the gold seal of Carter Global Holdings. Effective immediately, all negotiations with Kingsley Investments are terminated. Carter Global stands for integrity before profit. The signature at the bottom read, Malcolm J. Carter, but everyone knew whose hand truly guided it. Daniel Reeves was gone before noon escorted out. Access badge disabled. His last sight of the ballroom came through a cracked door, where staff quietly replaced the ruined carpet. And Evelyn? She didn't watch the news. She didn't need to. She sat by her window, sunlight spilling over a vase of lilies, the city humming below. Her phone buzzed once a message from her son. "It's done. They'll never forget your name." She smiled faintly. "They never knew it to begin with," she whispered. "Now they do." Outside, the city moved on, but the echo of that night lingered, a reminder that power, when used with grace, doesn't shout, it corrects. Weeks later, the video still circled the world. A son's loyalty, a mother's calm, a reckoning wrapped in silence. Reporters called it justice. Evelyn called it Tuesday. Standing on her balcony, she watched the city lights shimmer below the same skyline that once looked untouchable. She whispered to no one in particular, "Respect doesn't come from money, it comes from memory." Then she turned away, leaving the view behind. Because some stories don't end with applause, they end with peace.